Greetings, my friends. This is Maerlande, and today's guest for the 2021 tournament finals is Sai, who played Pangaea. And
my name's Sai.
I believe, as everybody knows, well, maybe not quite. Maybe I won't go there. He does exceptionally well in this game. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a question for you, the one I've been starting these with.
Mm-hmm.
What did you play in your qualifier, and how did that go?
Okay, yeah, so I played Jotunheim. If you want, I can actually talk about the build that I used for that, because
Go ahead.
That I think is, yeah, I used a build that I think is pretty atypical.
Mm-hmm.
If you want, I can actually send you the files for that as well.
Yeah, go right ahead. And
I'm gonna send you turn 1.
Yeah.
Once you look at it, you'll immediately see what I'm talking about with the build.
Perfect.
Let me find it.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. And because it is kind of interesting, I know, I believe it was Isataris. His qualifier was one of the first games that Dominions he ever played.
Yeah. He was one of the he's one of those folks that learns by testing rather than learns by playing. So like he'll just put in the time to like get off running.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually think that's much better, or that's like a stronger way to learn. All right, I'm just gonna drop these in the voice chat.
Well, it's
Files.
It's how I did it.
Yeah.
When I started in 2007, I played single player for about a year and almost exclusively the Monkey Nations until I had them completely down.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started playing a multiplayer because I got into Dominions through like a strategy game Skype group.
Okay.
So I actually was playing blitzes, like, you know, tiny 4 or 5 player blitzes before I actually ever touched single player.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you started playing similar to when I did around 2008 or something, right?
No, I started playing midway through Dominions 4 shortly after it came out.
Oh, you didn't play 3. Oh, somehow or other,
No,
I thought you played 3.
Yeah, no, never played it.
It's easy for me to mix it up. Did you send those cards, or
no?
they're,
I did
they're not?
Just
they're not coming.
I tried to drop both of them and it crashed.
Oh, okay.
Here's,
Oh, there we are.
Here's 1. Yeah. Here's, 2, and then I think you'll also need the map file. Let me see if I have that. If I don't have the map file, then we're in trouble because I can't look at it that way.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'll need the map.
Yeah. Oh, I have it. Here we go.
Okay, and I have to make a directory for this. We'll do that while
then
we're
it's
chatting.
too big. I'll have to use Google Drive again. Are you going to edit this, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Because we're spending quite a bit of time on the.
Well, I could just hit pause here. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're back. Brief interlude and for some technical stuff. So at Sai's request, and I think this is a great idea, we're going to go over his build for the qualifier, and your game was tournament game number 12.
Yeah, so for the qualifier, I built my pretender specifically against the other nations in the lobby, knowing some of the pregame Diplo that there were going to be people who would attack me on site. In particular, Mictlin had designed their pretender specifically to try to rush me. So they...
Now, how did you know that?
They said as much.
Really? Why would you do that? Why would you? I can't believe what some people write in these chats.
So anyways, this game was also unusual in that it had a restart because one of the players just like straight up didn't show up after or something. So in the first game, they did attack me on site, so I knew that they lived up to it. And I beat back their rush on turn 6 or 7.
With this guy?
Same build, yeah.
Same build.
I didn't need to actually deploy it yet. I won the first fight with Beatty, but I kept the build the same because I knew, okay, they're gonna tweak their god and try again. But so I was confident that this build works in terms of just being able to get enough dudes out to fight Eagle Warriors with Province Defense Dumps and Beatty. But the primary purpose of this god is to serve as an early game super combatant. So it's an awake researcher.
Yes.
You can see there, it's this rainbow Scratty.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can research, and some of these paths give it access to a lot of self buffs that Jotunheim doesn't normally have access to. In particular, it's a guaranteed Foul Vapors casters. It's also a Moss Body caster, although Scratty can do that as well. And then late game, it's going to have Soul Vortex and Wailing Winds and all those other goodies.
Yes, the Death and Air. Yes.
Right. The primary thing that the air does and fire is that they allow you to forge resist rings. So if you're facing like thunder weapons, which I suspected that Micklin was going to run, and which I also know that Marignon, if they're going for a Flagellant Bless type thing, can run. So this god is basically designed to be able to forge its own gear to be able to make itself completely immune to enemy sacreds, and then Cloud Trapeze on top of them. And because it's an Awake Researcher, it also lets you hit those early research goals, that alteration for the self buffs, extremely early. So this guy can actually be geared and ready to go by turn 9, which is fast enough to fight off basically any Sacred Rush that you'll run into. So this is basically just an extremely defensive, robust Jotunheim build, and the scales are still good enough to allow for a completely solid expansion. Like I had, I think, either the best or second best expansion with this build, even though I had slightly reduced scales because I took only Prod 2. And also
your
Magic 3, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, like your starting purchase is the Javelis, which I'm very fond of.
Right. And the other interesting thing about this game, which is a little unfortunate, is that you will oftentimes, when you take Magic 3, start with Enchantment 1. If the game is set to not have random research, then you will automatically always have Enchantment 1 after turn 1, because your Pretender just researches it. And that's actually an incredibly important, like, very first thing to have access to, because that enables you to summon Long Dead, which bolsters your expansion. So I actually had an extremely unlucky roll here, because you have a more than 50% chance, you have a, I think, like 5 out of 7 chance of getting Enchantment 1. So I got a little unlucky there. Usually what you want to do is on turn 2, your first Gigja that you recruit starts casting Reanimation, and you basically just keep spending your death gems on reanimation casts to bolster your starting expansion.
And what's your national 2 deaths? So that's solid. Absolutely.
So in this game I wasn't able to do that though, because you know, I didn't hit that, so I wasn't able to start doing the summoning till turn 3, which means I'm basically one expansion party down. In spite of that, I still did fine, but I'm just bringing that up as like that's sort of a trick, I guess, that Jotunheim can do, and which is almost always worth doing, just in order to make your already really solid expansion even better. And then when you hit Enchantment 2 later, so you can summon Mound Kings, you can also take those Giants underwater. So you can take those isolated pawns, like the one that I have on this map in 54. And an Awake Researcher kind of helps facilitate that. Not that it's required, because you should always be able to do this as Jotunheim, but it basically ensures that you can get it turn 2 under normal circumstances, if you're playing with random research turned off. And in cases like this where I didn't hit it, it still means that I can get it, I think, turn 3.
Yeah, this is a very interesting approach. I've done some previous, we did some chats a year and almost 2 years ago about Awake Researchers, but that was for astral buffing for body ethereal. Your approach here is very, very different, and this is cool. I like this. I like the discussion about ways to make an Awake Researcher really shine.
Yeah, so this guy is basically designed to fend off a rush. That's his job. That's his only job, actually. And then later, he's still an amazingly good super combatant who's magic phase capable. When you're fighting a Sacred Rush, or just when you're fighting like a strong Sacred Nation early game, if you have one unit that is immune to their Sacreds that guarantee win one fight, that's all you need. Because their whole thing as a Sacred Nation is get their ball of Sacreds together, overpower your army.
Yeah, doomstack you, lock your cap down, screw your economy.
Exactly, which means that they are going to be balling up. So once you have one guy who can just Cloud Trapeze on top of them and kill them, you win the war. They can't come back into the game after that. So even if you are not rushed, this build is also still an extremely good first war build, because you just design you do the exact same thing, except you do it offensively.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna take a moment to give the audience a refresher. We are talking about size qualifier round. just as sort of a backup to how did he get into the final?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this game, because we had 3 underwater nations, we had the.
Oh, really? You had 3 water nations?
Yeah.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah, we had Isrelia and Atlantis. So you have the whole. There's no Pelagia, right? So any of those 3 can win. So
right.
The game is basically on a timer for land nations because whoever wins the water bowl will guaranteed win the game because they will have they have an uncontestable research advantage if you don't win the game first.
Yes.
So that's part of the reason why that's like kind of a secondary reason, I guess, why I favored an aggressive build because having an awake researcher means that you hit certain spikes faster. So you hit your Ench 5 Alt 4.
Right. Right.
Or actually, you only need Alt 3 in this case. Spike. So you can basically snowball from winning one war into taking all the thrones that you need.
Right.
As with the way that these tournament maps are set up, because you only need 6 thrones to win, you really have to win one war decisively and then throne rush. That's all you need to do for this size qualifier game.
Yeah, the qualifiers were 12 player,
actually,
right?
No, this is 5 actually. It's only 5 points. It's even easier. You basically need to kill one player decisively and secure the thrones on your border. That's it.
Oh, that's right.
You have to. Yeah.
The 2021 tournament qualifiers were only 9 player. I was getting confused with the 2022 where we're massively bigger.
Yeah, it's actually the same idea. You typically still need 6 thrones, so it's still the same thing, except you might need to like poke an additional nation. So basically, you want your expansion to be very good, so that you can at least get in range of all the thrones that you border. You want to have the capability of clearing any throne, which Jotunheim has, because you can make Scratty super combatants that can clear throne provinces. In my case, I also have a pretender that's even better at that. And then you also want to be able to win a first war decisively against someone who is big enough to have reached their far throne.
Okay.
So that's all you need to do.
Okay.
And that was. In this case, I had basically an opportunity handed to me because Abyssia was running a scales build, which means that they're functionally helpless until they get big blood stuff out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So Abyssia, in spite of running, a scales build, which I don't consider the best way to play it, they just, through sheer having enough dudes and the Vanheim player being a little less confident of a player who didn't do very well early game.
Okay.
He sort of ran over Vanheim, and then I gave Vanheim a bunch of items to, so that he won his last stand at his capital, and then I went and invaded Abyssia. And
there you go.
That was it. That was basically the game. Mick, who had wanted to rush me before the game started, didn't get the chance because they instead fought a 1v2 against Marignan and Ulm, and they did very well. Alexander is actually a pretty solid player, I think.
Okay.
Or at least in this game, they had a really good showing.
Yeah, that's not somebody I don't know, Alexander.
Yeah, they were actually in my qualifier round this year as well, but they couldn't rush me because I was an underwater nation. Haha. They did. In the very late game in my 2022 qualifier game, Alexandria didn't show up quite as well, but this game they did really well. They like basically held off a 1v2 for a really long time, basically until the game was over.
Well, I'm looking at your I'm gonna grab a screen clip of your opponents in this game because that's kind of cool. And so the only person of this group that I know is Mazirian. The rest are pretty, they're not people I know very well. So that's a good point about Alexandria. I haven't seen Alexandria much talking lately. Is he or she still in the game?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I know in my most recent qualifier round, they had a poor showing late game just due to not having enough mages at critical fights. Basically, the game ended with a throne rush where all 3 of their thrones were taken.
Yeah, which was your game in the 2022? I know
game 3.
Yeah, and you got coalitioned very badly very early.
No, that was Arco. Yeah.
Oh, that was Arco.
Moderation. Okay. Yeah, so I made a lot of mistakes that game, which is why I lost naturally.
But yours is yours is done. Number 3 is done.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I was Relia in that game. I wanted to attack Helheim in my first war, but I had set up on Yomi's coast after setting up what I thought was agreeable borders with them. Then Yomi attacked me, so I killed all of Yomi's armies, but then rather than conquering Yomi as I should have done, I gathered my stuff and then attacked Helheim. But by then it was too late because Helheim had already wrapped up their first war, so I was basically fighting the largest player in the game while they still had all of their stuff.
We should...
While they still had access to all their stuff. But that's a different thing.
We should do another talk about your 2022, although I don't want to do those without giving too many spoilers away, but they will be coming up.
Yeah, I tend to ramble, so...
No, you're fine. You can ramble.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much into that game, but...
No.
I just wanted to say basically like that I made very serious grand strategy mistakes in terms of like who I was fighting when, which is why I lost.
Okay.
The player who won the game also played really well. So they not only like executed just extremely good wars, they also executed basically a perfect throne rush where they deployed the entirety of their sacred forces stealthily.
Nice.
And then that was Ollie, who I'm sure you know. Ollie, that guy.
Oh, yeah. Ollie,
really friendly guy.
Yeah,
and he,
I know him.
He had a very large bless, including Twist Fate, so it was a really solid TNN build in general. And then he used the Sacred Dogs in order to add additional siege power, and because of his bless, they were also decently capable fighting units. So he was actually able to grab all 3 thrones that he needed to win from Roos on the same turn.
Okay.
So just, extremely solid throne rush, really well played. And also just like well played overall in terms of like how they picked their wars and who they fought and so on. So basically when I'm talking about my own mistakes, I don't want to take anything away from Ollie's play because he played excellently.
Super.
It's just I also like kind of recognized that I could have won that game if I'd played it better because I had such a large advantage from my nation selection as being the only underwater nation.
Okay.
If I'd picked better wars, I would have won, and if I'd picked a couple better battles, I would have won. Because like even though I'd picked a really bad first war, I still could have won it, but I dodged a fight that I would have won, and then took a fight without proper scouting, and I wound up losing. And then I set myself behind much too much by doing that. And then even if I picked no wars at all and just huddled in the water and researched up faster so that I hit my nexus a couple turns faster, I would have had enough juice in order to block the throne rush that way as well.
Okay.
So basically just, mistakes on my part, losing with what I felt was probably an unbalanced advantage from the size of the water that I had and the capabilities of the nation that I had.
So let's pull you back to...
let's talk about this.
Let's pull you back to this game. So I opened up your turn 12 because this is where you said, but before we go into what you're doing turn 12, can we talk about your design?
Yes. Okay. So this game, I did absolutely nothing special. So this is, in my opinion, the meta Pangaea build. This is the build that, like, if anyone were to write a Pangaea guide, this type of build is going to be featured in it. The exact nuances, like the very specific values of, do you want production 1 or sloth 1? Do you want like shock resistance, or do you want poison resistance 5 or poison resistance 15? Fire resistance 10 or fire resistance 5? Like all these things are minutia. The core of the build is that you take an imprisoned rainbow pretender.
Right.
You take magic 3 always. That's the one mandatory part of any Pangaea build. And you take larger, at least some defense, magic weapons, and resists.
Right. Right.
So the concept of this build is extremely straightforward. The White Centaur with this type of bless are flawless expanders. So especially if you use your satyr to screen, you guys covered this in the expansion or in the tournament videos.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
I think you. Yeah, I was gonna say you guys actually spent a lot of time talking about the satyr screening stuff. So props to you. So I don't have anything to add. Lucid covered everything. Yeah.
That was like a year and a half ago, so I'd have to go back and watch those. But yes, we did spend a lot of time on each of the nations, highlighting their expansion techniques and their scripting stuff. But in this case, this is a chance for us to talk about your build design. And this is a very tidy, inexpensive build.
Yes.
You get huge power out of it. I've used a build like this with a number of nations. I've hardly ever played Pan. but this is not unsimilar to builds I've done with the same idea of the imprisoned scales build.
Yes, this is, at the time that I made this build, this was the accepted way to play Pangaea, and it's correct. This is the strongest way to play a very strong nation.
So I'd like to talk about, if we could, your thoughts on larger. I'm actually a big fan of larger with certain things. Particularly, though, I think, let me just take a look here. White centaurs are size 3. So yes, by going for the larger, you're losing some attack density. But you tell me your thinking behind why this is great.
Okay, yeah, so this is sort of a conversation that I think has been done a lot. So I don't want to spend too much time hashing it out, but larger, you should always take larger on White Centaur. 2 things to keep in mind. First of all, if you are trying to do a defense tank bless, where you tank by just not letting people hit you because of high defense score, the most important thing that you can include in, or that you have to like consider with your design, is the cavalry attribute, because that reduces the amount of harassment that you take, which is basically mandatory in order for your defense to actually do anything. White Centaur are not cavalry, they're infantry. They're very fast infantry, function like cavalry because of these lances and stuff, but they don't have that like defense thing. So they functionally are not defense tanks. You can't build them that way. Okay. Or I mean, you can, but they'll lose to a large number of very, very normal things that you'll fight in like an ordinary game. The loss of attack density doesn't matter in Pangaea's case in particular, because you already are always going to have size 2 units that are going to square fill for your White Centaur. You always have Maenants throughout the entire game. Always. So you always have that as like your backup, and then during expansion you have Satyr because you start with them and because you can forest recruit them. So you don't actually lose attack density in terms of the attacks that you're receiving, and in terms of the attacks that you're dishing out, because you're using relatively few elite sacreds. You aren't going to have, at least in the early game, any situations where the White Centaur are not able to scoot around and like wrap around the enemy and go attack. In fact, having a larger surface area coverage for your White Centaur can actually be a good thing, because it enables you to go around certain enemy formations if people mess up, and then attack their mage line or archer line directly. So there's basically no downsides to using the larger bless. I mean, obviously there's the literal downside of the defense, and it adds a huge amount to both the survivability and the mobility of your already very survivable and mobile sacreds. It's basically like, if you could design a bless for White Centaur, you would put larger on it.
How much does repel come into your calculation?
It helps. It's nice.
But it's not the critical issue.
Yeah, it's not why you take larger. You take larger because, I mean, it helps. It really does help, especially when they go berserk, and when they have blood surge. You wind up with a a really solid attack score on what goes from a length 3 to a length 4 weapon, which matters for repelling indies. It doesn't matter quite as much for many early wars. It can matter against Nabaa. It does not matter against Mictlan. It can sometimes matter against Uruk. It typically won't matter against Ulm. It's basically hit or miss as to whether or not that repel length change actually has any impact. The main time that's going to come up is reducing attrition during expansion, but regardless of what bless you run, you shouldn't really lose any, or more than 1 or 2 against very hard provinces during expansion anyways. So like that advantage that it gives you is not as big of a deal as I think that it's sometimes made out to be. It does help. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not zero, right? It's just not as big of a deal as the other things that it provides, namely the increased hit points, mobility, and that increased surface area to give yourself a little bit more resistance against earth meld and other...
so basically, if you're running a line formation, you have a wider line.
Yes.
And you probably look at some of those. That's not White Centaurs.
So the major downside to running a larger bless is the reduced density for buffing. But Pangaea is not a point buff nation. like they use wide area of effect buffs. They use like mostly AoE 25 spells, and then Wooden Warriors to get mass protection, that sort of thing. And at the points in the game where you're using those AoE 25 buffs, you'll typically want to be running multiple mid-size stacks, rather than running one Doom stack anyways. So, and you'll also have a relatively large number of Earth 3 mages, so you'll have an easy time getting coverage. So the downside that's a huge deal for nations like IS, for example. Like IS is the premium point buff nation. They have the best sacreds for receiving point buffs. They can, they can put Moss Body, Iron Warriors, Body Ethereal, Luck, Quickness. Like they have every AoE 1 buff in the game. So therefore IS should never run larger, right? Because they need to buff their guys. Whereas Pangaea can run it safely because they're not reliant on those AoE 1 buffs on their sacreds.
Okay. Good. Makes sense to me. So we're looking at turn 12, and I have to comment that both Lucid and I had a heck of a fun time with your pretender name.
The PNS broadcast.
Yeah, so we love that.
When I created this build, my initial idea for what I was going to do in the game is get lots of Harpy Scouts, send them all over the map, and then produce a radio show where I would comment on the state of the game.
Perfect.
It didn't wind up happening, but that was like the reason that I named the game is it was going to be the Pangaea news service, right? And then I was going to be doing a Pangaea news broadcast thing where I would, do a little radio thing and put on my announcer radio voice. And
well, I'm a bit of a Fallout nut. Like I've been playing Fallout a lot, and so the whole idea of Galactic News Network or anything like that to me is very fun. It just brings things up. But on that very topic, speaking of fun names, what the heck is this? HV Kaltenborn.
Oh, he's a radio announcer.
Oh, he is.
Yeah, he's okay. You know that the stereotypical voice of 1920s, where it's like, how should I put this? Like,
oh, Edward R. Murray.
Or with this nation.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Is up in arms. Like that guy is HV Kaltenborn.
Okay. I didn't recognize that name. I gotta Google that. HV. You keep going while I look this up because.
Okay. No, you're not missing much. I'm just like that's why I picked him. Is he's the voice that I was going for.
Yeah. No, it's
the broadcasting tower. Yeah.
Cool. It's just that's why I wanted to ask about it because it's fun and you're making a pop culture reference, but from a historical perspective, which an awful lot of people aren't going to necessarily get. So I think it's fun for you to have this opportunity to tell us, hey, here's the reference I was making. I think Luce and I completely missed this. And
no, it's a very weird reference.
Well, it's obscure, but not.
Yeah.
If it was Edward R. Murray or something along those lines, we might have caught it. But I didn't notice this prior to just talking with you right now. Now you have another fun name here, or maybe not. No. Oh no, that's a hero.
Yeah, later in the game you'll have a bunch of commanders that NeuroNerd named. You'll be able to pick those out.
Okay, cool. So you did mention that the reason to start here on turn number 12 is this is where you make strategic decisions and diplomatic decisions. Can you share with us what those are?
So the Diplo had been happening a little bit earlier with Ashdod, that we were going to kill Nabah. And then I think we invited Agartha in later because I like talking with Johnny, so we were talking, and then the first war thing came up, and I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna go kill Nabah. So it turned from like a 2v1 into a 3v1.
Yeah, sadly, I don't think I'm going to be able to interview Johnny.
Is he around? He's like
he just left all of the Discords I share with him. So I did want to have a talk with him, but I don't know if I'll be able to find him. Maybe it'll change.
Didn't he sub in for a tournament game for the qualifiers for this year?
Yeah, he did.
And he left again?
Yes. So anyways, that's a bit of an aside. It would be nice to talk about, yes, it would be nice to talk about Agartha in this series of interviews, but I don't know. He might come back and I'll snag him. Agartha. Well, we could do that you and I could do that another time. Let's focus today here on, your amazingly awesome nation.
Yeah, so yeah, Pangaea is very strong. I played it to its strengths. Right now, we're still essentially in the phase of the game before magic is relevant, but in which stealth still very much is. So I remember in the tournament commentary that you guys had seen, oh, you know, he took the throne, he's claiming the throne. As you can see here, what I'm doing right now is just infrastructure stuff, but I'm already sneaking my first raiding parties into Naba.
I see that, and that's something, that's one of the reasons I wanted to see this from your turn perspective, not the Omni perspective, because when we did Omni, we missed a lot. We couldn't see your dryads. We couldn't see where you were sneaking until you popped back up. So.
Yeah. So at this phase of the game, let me look ahead a little more. Turn 13, more sneaky stuff.
Yeah, you're grabbing this forest here. And forests for you are awesome things, and you're moving into Naba, so you're going to put some hardcore pressure onto Naba. How big is this army you're moving there into Naba? So moderate size. I mean, 8 white centaurs is still pretty solid.
It's just a raiding party. Yeah, it's enough to beat PD. You don't want to run into a large number of actual units.
Right.
The actual attack happens on turn 15.
Okay.
It's a mini alpha strike from my part. I'm only hitting 3 provinces.
Should we pop out? Should we pop out to that one?
Look at that one?
Yeah, let's pop out to that one.
And then I can kind of talk through what I had been doing in the meantime up until this point as well.
There we go. Look at that. 1, 2, 3. Look at that.
So yeah, you can kind of see what's going on in the world, that Jotunheim is on Mikland's capital. I was not actually worried about Jotunheim at this point in the game, because my thinking basically is that Jotunheim isn't going to wheel into attacking me right away, and his border for doing so is really awkward.
Yes,
right?
it's a pretty crappy border.
Yeah, and then if you look at that throne, like, that's cut off as well. So he doesn't have a great way to just immediately attack me, and Mikland has a couple extra provinces as well. So if there's going to be a Jotunheim coalition, I'll, you know, let them do that if they want to, but I'm not going to get involved. I don't feel threatened by Jotunheim at this point.
Yeah, you've got your one pond already. So you've got a nice tidy, yeah, it's a pretty tidy border. How's your relations with Ulm at this point in the game?
I don't know if we talked.
Okay.
I think it was like, oh, are you cool with the borders? Yeah, cool. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
I think that was about it. I don't do that much diplomacy in general. Even though I set up like a 3v1 this game, it was not like a whole masterminded thing. It was very much off the cuff. Oh, hey, do you want to hit this guy? Cool, let's go do it.
Okay.
I didn't even have an NAP with Ashdod until after he'd taken Naba's capital, I think.
Okay.
And even then, that was only because like he basically insisted on it.
So I have a question just came to mind. Why Naba as your first target?
He's there. I wanted 240, and his build also has luck 3, which you're not allowed to take in games with aggressive players.
Yes.
Yeah, like I think I'd mentioned this in my messages to Omniscience, but his scales were illegal. Like if you run this build, you're going to die early. So you know, if someone's going to eat him, it may as well be me. And then, you know, I obviously very much want 240 because that's a very rich province. And if I can get a second farm,
oh my god,
244, yeah.
Oh yeah.
The farm on 244 is actually not that good.
No.
But you know, I'll take it. That's a blood huntable province.
Oh sure, and it's the free fort.
Yeah, 230 is also very good. That's like another really, like, that's a mid-sized regular province, which means it's also going to have pretty decent sites. And then it also gives me basically the entirety of his border with Uruk, which denies Uruk some southern expansion. And it also means that I have a very natural next target to fight.
Okay.
So like basically I can maintain good relationships with Agartha and Ashdod. I don't need to fight them early. They don't necessarily want to fight me either. I have a really solid border with Jotunheim. I can crush Ulm at this point in the game if we fight, because I'm going to be hitting Foul Vapors really soon. And then I can pick a fight with Uruk before Uruk stuff comes online. And then it turns out that Uruk also had illegal scale. So like it was very easy for me to go from very quickly getting a bunch of very easy territory out of Naba, and then immediately going into Uruk. So it's basically like a snowball thing, right? And that's what wound up getting that coalition against me. But is that my first wars were so easy? It really was just snowballing from just grabbing a bunch of provinces here with, very little resistance because I wasn't the one taking Naba's capital, to immediately going into a next war, to, again, just cruising over Uruk and grabbing all of Uruk's stuff, and then immediately going into the next war. So this was very much a snowball start to my game.
So I'm going to pop in and just take a look at one of your sample. So this is a very simple formation and probably a very, very simple. So your blessing probably ×2, hold and attack, I'm guessing?
I mean, this is the cast. Oh, you mean the White Centaur? Yeah, they're just hold and attack. But no, there's nothing interesting here. It's on advance and cast so that it can do the Tanglevine stuff.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, nice, tidy little bit of, easy stuff. You stuck with block formation. You didn't go for a line. Makes blessing easier. And as per usual, they berserk.
Those guys can't do line formation also. They don't have 80 leadership.
Right. No.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay, question. Obviously, I think I know the answer. You're using the Hierophantides as your commanders because they can bless. Right?
Yes.
Otherwise, you might use something else, but okay, well, that's very tidy. Now, what else have we got to see here? Anything much here? Well, that's a much bigger force.
Yeah, that's just 2 raiding parties.
Yeah, put together.
Like a combined stack, yeah.
And your infrastructure, as you said, you're getting this up. It's almost done. How much PD? Only 7? Okay.
Yeah, but my scales haven't spread there yet, so it's still in Naba's luck scales, or luck scales, one of the two. In either case, I don't really need to worry that much about indie attacks.
Indie attacks, no. And because of your attacks, you've cut off any Naba trying to take this fort out on you.
Right.
So, because last turn, or turn 12, when you started working on this Palisades, you actually had a major army there to be sure you didn't lose that fort construction.
Honestly, that major army there was not to make sure that I didn't lose the fort. It was that I could peel pieces of it off slowly without alerting Naba that he was being invaded, while also still having my big stack there to go attack Naba's fort on 240.
Okay, and you've cracked it already.
Right.
And you're storming
I've got
already.
You can see I've got my 2 Holy Threes with that group. It's a Palisade, so it cracks instantly with 134 seat strength. So yeah, the reason that I was sitting there was not to protect the province, but to have my stuff there to go take that fort. Okay,
super. Interesting little tidbit here I'm seeing. This is something I try to do. Leave somebody in garrison. Just in case your storm goes to shit. You never know. That way you don't lose the siege.
You also want to leave a ranged unit, if at all possible, so that it doesn't die in a regular phase battle.
Right. Yep. Super. Okay. Well, this is tidy. Now, how are we?
If you want to go to turn 22, maybe?
22, okay. And we're at about 35 minutes, so it's been a lively session. I mean, you and I have been talking more than 35 minutes, but we've got 35 minutes of recording.
22 is...
22? Let's take a look.
Yeah, so this is the point where you can kind of see a little bit more of the state of the game in general. And you also kind of get an idea for what I'm doing in order to prepare for my next steps.
So the first thing I see is this irritating bit of sea trolls.
Yeah, that was annoying.
Isn't that a pain in the butt?
Yeah, just event stuff. So one thing I want to talk about is if you look at 195, you can see my Pandemoniacs are hunting.
Yeah, you started up. You got 3 of them.
So basically, as soon as you finish expansion or as soon as you finish recruiting expansion parties with Pangaea, which typically happens turn 8 or so, you want to push the Pandemoniac button and then never release it for the entire game.
Yeah.
After Blood Source, you only get them from your capital.
Yeah.
You can't ever get enough of them. So I've got 2 in 212 and 3 in 195. That's a little bit more... typically you can put 8 Blood Hunters in one province, easy peasy, no problem. And it's more like gold to blood slave income efficient to have relatively concentrated blood hunting. You generally want 8, 10 Blood Hunters in a province, you hunt down the population, you move on. And that gets you, you get slightly fewer blood slaves by doing it that way, but the gold loss is also reduced because the gold loss from the initial unrest generated from blood hunting is massive compared to the like continued reduction.
Yeah, you
in
could.
the case of
Folks who really want to get into this in great detail, there's the very good spreadsheet by Mandarb. You can look at, you can work it through. I have a tendency to do my blood by a rule of thumb basis because I just don't play that hard anymore.
Sure.
But I know you, and I know that you are very much a optimization kind of guy. So
yeah, so the reason that I'm doing it differently here, where I have more spread out blood hunting, is basically just due to the limitation of the blood hunters. So like from Pangaea, because they're cap only blood hunters, I value the blood slave income a lot more, and I'm willing to sacrifice more income in order to get myself that steady flow of slaves, just because I'll need them for lifelong protections, which is like core to how Pangaea plays this mid game. So
and you've got a long time till you can transition to Vampire Lords. I mean, I know that from the main tournament series, you transition to Vampire Lords eventually, but
extremely hard. Yes, I have a Vampire Lord for every province.
But that is not easy for somebody like Pangaea. You know, you just don't have the national pass to pull that off easily. I mean, you don't get any death, right?
Correct. You don't nationally get death, but you can generally find your way into death mages.
But you've got to empower a death mage into blood, get some boosters, you know, various tricks. Unless it's
you have a couple ways into death. I stole my way into death, if I recall correctly.
I
took a death mage and then empowered it. But there's various other ways of doing it.
Well, and you've got a rainbow pretender, so
my pretender does not have death.
Doesn't have death. Okay. Okay. There you go.
There's no real death bless that you want as Pangaea.
No.
And like I mentioned, when you hit the point in the game where you need to get Vampire Lords, you can get death mages. Like it's going to happen. At a certain point in Dominions, when you get to a certain size, you have access to all the paths. You just will.
Yeah.
The difference is
one of my classics for a nature nation is the Forest Troll is a decent way to get yourself up into some death.
It's very expensive, actually. Like, if you look at the gem cost to get Death 1, it's really high. But more to the point, when you get to that size, you'll naturally find all the paths, but what you won't necessarily have is the gem income that you would have as a nation that has that path spread naturally. So, like, a nation like Jotunheim, because they're searching death in all their provinces, they'll just have way better death income than you. If you'll still have like a couple D2 mages or whatever. So you can summon Vampire Lords, but you won't have a huge death gem income, so you won't have like a bunch of, Spectres and Wraith Lords and so on. That's sort of how I perceive, what's the word? The spread of paths that you have access to. Like, eventually...
Diversity?
Everything. Diversity, thank you.
Yeah. I tend to be a diversity player, but I also tend to be a kind of conservative player. I don't snowball a lot. It's a bit of a weakness, and I've been trying to do less of that. But
yeah, when you get to a big enough size, you will have all the paths. Basically,
exactly
is I guess my point. But yeah, the reason that I wanted to bring up this turn is this is sort of like my peacetime. This is the Nabal War is done. I haven't yet started my war against Uruk, and I'm just basically securing my territory, and I'm doing all the comfy infrastructure stuff.
Okay.
So lots of site searching.
So you agreed with Ashdod he could have the capital. I'm guessing.
Actually got first crack at the capital. He just lost.
I remember that. That. Yeah, we'd have to go back to that episode. It would be episode probably around, I think our numberings for the episode, if somebody wants to look it up.
Like up till or something?
Well, up till this point, the episode number tends to be the turn number, but a little bit later it falls behind because we start doing 2 or 3 turns in an episode.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact turn number either, but I remember that the reason that Agartha had lost is that I assumed he had fire resistance in his bless, so I looked at what he had, I looked at what Nabal's potential tech was, I'm like, oh yeah, no problem, you got this easy peasy, and then the actual fight happened, and his guys got lit on fire and died, and it's like, oh, you're not running fire resistance.
Oh god, yes, that's right, he had his Earth Readers too close to his Magma Kids. If I remember correctly. Wasn't that it? He didn't burn his own guys?
No, it was a Nobala just cast like combustion and
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was it was basically just due to a fire resist thing because he took +4 attack in his build instead of fire resistance. And it never occurred to me that he would have done that, so I didn't even bother to check. I was like, oh yeah, you got this. And
yeah, for me with the Gartha, it's just so blatant that you want a little bit of fire resistance because you know you're going to make magma kids, and there's nothing worse than your magma kids killing off your own guys.
Yep. I assumed like you're a Gartha, of course you have fires, but
yeah.
Anyways, that's
okay.
not what happened here. And then he got booted off Nobala's cap, but then he's still fine. He got some land. He just had to lose a bunch of sacreds for it.
Well, and I've already started the series with talking about Ashdod, so anybody who wants to kind of get that perspective comparing to this perspective, those videos are up.
Yeah, so then I'm just going around grabbing my thrones. So I'm taking the throne on 190, and then I'm going to go for the throne on 184 right after this.
184?
Yeah. Both these are actually very easy thrones for me to take with my Bless, because the primary threatening thing on these thrones is fire damage, and I have 10 FR.
Excellent.
So, yeah. So these were both really easy things where I just threw blobs of White Centaur at them. The reason that you want to bring a lot of White Centaur is that the Fire Snake's bite can kill your guys because it's poison. So even with some poison resistance, you're going to lose guys to it. If you bring a lot of White Centaur, though, you can kill them quickly enough that you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
So,
what about 257? Are you going to make a shot for that?
No, but not because I can't clear it, but because I can clear it for free later.
Okay.
And I also wanted to steal Zeus. Like, he's one of my favorite throne pretenders to capture.
But that isn't the one you did steal. We'll get to that down the road.
I didn't get to steal Zeus.
No, but the one you did steal, we had a lot of fun with. We'll get to that when we get to those turns.
Yeah, I don't value the Netter of Kings or the Solar Serpent nearly as much. Zeus is just, because he's a big air mage, that's something that's always really useful late game.
Now, do you have your... You don't have your charm yet.
Oh, yeah, no. By the time that I had charm, I wasn't able to grab that throne. Like, it basically took me too long to get to that point. But I assumed that the throne was difficult enough that Pelagia wasn't going to take it quickly.
Okay.
And Jotunheim was going to be busy doing other things to worry about in the throne. So
yes, we know by this point in time that Jotunheim is having a rough go.
No, he's actually doing amazingly well. It's just
this isn't people. Yeah, this isn't when it all goes. No, it's a little bit later on. I think turn 30-ish was the episode I just put up.
Yeah, I think Jotunheim at this point in the game is actually the biggest player. Like in terms of size. But like I can tell because he's so big and because he's like killed a player already, he's grabbing like a bunch of thrones, he's going to be fighting coalition. Like that's just going to happen.
Oh, that brings up a question I wanted to ask for you. What's your opinion on avoiding coalitions? Like, do you stay at a moderate size? You don't bother?
I fight coalitions.
Okay, so you don't bother trying to sort of keep yourself under the radar of the diplomatic possibilities.
No, and I think that's a really weak way to play as well. I think that trying to keep yourself small intentionally doesn't actually help you. It just makes you more vulnerable when those sorts of things happen.
Okay.
Like, the stronger that you are, the more effectively you can fight off multiple players. And Dominions actually, up until the point where everyone has all the research, you actually have an advantage being one bigger nation fighting two smaller nations. Not only do you have additional concentration of resources, but the research advantage that you have also compounds, right? So like if you have double the research of two other people, then both of them together can't beat you, right? Because the research is added together.
Yeah, because they can't share their research. I mean, the only way is to send each other back and forth your boosters, and that isn't very effective.
Very late in the game, there's an advantage to having multiple players because you can do different like magic phase things. You get more value out of the diversity of having broad resources, and then eventually everyone has all the research anyways. Yeah,
so, having an ally drop a magic phase attack on top of a fight for you can be pretty huge. So,
yeah, exactly. So,
but that's much later in the game.
Yes. So, but many games, like this game obviously did go the distance, but many games, I would even go so far as to say most games never reach that point, and it's always an advantage to be in the driver's seat.
I don't know where you play. Every single one of my fucking games goes to turn 100.
Yeah, but by the time it goes to turn 100, it's typically like decided who the major players are going to be.
Oh yeah.
You don't get to turn 100 with 8 relevant players. You get to turn 100 with like 3.
Or yeah, I'm in a Disciples with 6, but that's only 3 teams, so it's effectively 3.
Yeah, and so in order to reach that point where you are one of the dominant people in the late game, you want to snowball.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think that it's ever a good idea to intentionally make yourself weaker.
Okay.
I mean, there are exceptions, obviously, but the exceptions are just that, exceptions, and they're rare enough that you'll kind of like see them as they come up. And
well,
the
reason I asked that is because we're talking about a turn here where you are kind of consolidating, you're kind of tidying up, you're getting your infrastructure in position, but your reasoning had nothing to do with not picking a next fight.
Yeah, no, I already kind of have in my brain that I'm going to go for Uruk next.
Okay.
It's just that I want to grab the thrones on 190 and 184 before anyone else can get to them. And and the reason that I didn't do the same for 257 is that I sort of reasoned that no one else was going to go for it.
Now, if I remember correctly, about this time in the game, there was a Discord formed up, which was the Anti-Pelagia group.
The Coast Guard. It was
the Coast Guard, yes. And
I did it for, yeah, it was funny. It was not ever an effective alliance, and never had an inter-alliance non-aggression pact or anything like that. It was really just for the meme.
But both Luce and I joined it to sort of see what was going on. And
we'll go to it eventually.
Oh yeah. So you, at this point, were not all that concerned about Pelagia.
I was very concerned about Pelagia.
Oh, okay.
I told him, we fought actually, or he bounced off of 254 at some point. Like I PD dumped it and he bounced off. It's the waste.
Okay.
Like that's why it has 20 PD. Is that we had a conversation about it. He asked for like that province for like a nap, and I said no, I'm not making a nap with you. And then he attacked it and lost, and then didn't bother me.
Okay, and I mean obviously it's difficult for a nation like Pangaea to seriously fight in the water.
Yeah, like I did, like, to me, making a nap with an underwater nation is very much a one-sided thing if I'm not planning on fighting them on land. Like, if they don't have coastal holdings that I need to go after, then if he's giving me a nap without asking for that province, then sure, I'll take it because it doesn't matter, right? I'm not fighting him anyway, so it's a freebie. And that happens later in the game, that he basically gives me a nap for free without, in my opinion, there being a good reason for him to give me one. But we'll get to that later. At this point in the game, basically, he said he would give me an app for this. I said no, he attacked, he lost, and then he didn't bother me again because I basically showed that I would fight and commit whatever resources were required in order to hold my land against him, and he doesn't want to focus on the tech that would let him win those fights. Right. Because Pelagia is very much capable of taking fights with, like, Conch 5. But I also have my alt 4, Conch 3 Dryads. And I also have, do I have construction 4 yet? Let me check my research thing here. I don't, but I'm getting it very soon. So I will have LLP Dryads very soon. So he functionally can't hold land provinces against me at this point. And he's not willing to waste the resources on, like, a forever war. So
that brings up a question.
But yes, I was worried about Pelagia.
Okay. What is your sort of personal decision on how many pans versus how many Dryads you make?
You want 2 pans per army.
2 pans per army. Okay.
And then early game for searching. And as many Dryads as you can get. Okay.
So basically, you just make enough pans to give you the large buffs and the large pan power, but otherwise you go. Yeah, they are.
I'm mostly making pans at this point in the game because I don't have 2 pans per army.
Okay.
Like, you want to have, like, in order to get to that 2 pans per army point, you need, like, 6 or 8 pans. And then later in the game, your pans become your big casters, so you want even more than, you want, like, 8 pans per army. But yeah, in the early game, you want an Earth 3 pan and a Nature 4 pan for Howl.
Okay.
And then you want basically, like, you have certain battlefield spells and certain buff spells. And then you make these little boxes where you have, like, a pan in the middle, and then you have cataphracts or white centaur and, like, a little box around them.
Right.
We can look at those groups when we get to that war with Ind, but like I mentioned earlier, this is what I would consider very normal pan play. Like what I'm talking about here in terms of like the formations and so on. This is very core, normal Pangaea stuff.
Okay, another...
no fancy tricks.
Okay, another question related to it. Obviously, in your capital, you make white centaurs.
Yes.
What about other troops? What are your preferences?
So this build is designed for cataphracts. If you are going a cataphract build, you want Order 1 Prod 1. If you're going for the Centaur Warriors, the Berserker guys, you want Order 1 Sloth 1.
Okay.
So that's your build choice that you make before the game starts. I chose to go for cataphracts, but they're not relevant yet because I'm still spending all of my gold on infrastructure and mages.
Right.
They
So you're
relevant when I fight the coalition.
And how many cedars do you make? I know you use some.
Never.
Okay.
No. I don't. I use them for expansion, and otherwise I don't touch them.
You don't touch them after that.
Ads.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. I think I've covered anything I could think of to ask about this turn. Shall we jump ahead?
Yeah. So if we want to go to turn 30 is a little late. That's when I've already done. Oh, that's when I'm already on Uruk's capital. Let me look at like maybe turn 24.
24? Yeah, we'll jump a couple ahead.
That might not be far ahead enough because I blitzed Uruk, so like that was.
No.
Yeah, turn 25. All right, turn 25. I'm moving on up to Uruk's, or turn 27. I'm moving up to Uruk's border.
Okay, let's jump to that one.
Yeah, that's not far ahead enough. I want to look at when I first attack Uruk and kind of like. I can talk through like my thought process.
There we are. So we're coming up to 53 minutes. I try to cut these at about an hour. Yeah. That seems to be what my audience likes.
Okay, yeah.
So let's cover your strategic goals for this turn, and we can come back to the particulars of this war in next episode.
I actually kind of want to. So there's nothing fancy with this war. I'm going to kill this guy and take his stuff.
Okay, good.
Yeah, nothing interesting actually. I want to look at turn 29 actually. Is I think the interesting one. That's where.
Let's do that.
So this is the turn after I attacked Uruk. So like turn 28, I launched my initial attack.
Right.
Turn 29 is when I am moving forward. So there's two things to note. One is that I don't know where Uruk's army is. So
yeah,
I'd seen that he had a bunch of troops in his capital on the turn before, and then on the turn before this, I went and attacked Province 10, and then because Uruk's forts are city palisades, and you generally don't upgrade them that much because like you don't need to upgrade them in order to get the mage production.
Okay.
So these things only have 100 fort defense, so they're very easy to crack, especially when you're using a large number of high-strength units like Pangaea does naturally, right? Like
You've cracked this one.
Yeah, but I'm not storming it, and the reason that I'm not storming it is for two reasons. So one is that I think that Uruk's army is inside this fort, and I don't know what he has or what his tech level is.
Okay.
Right, so I can't take that fight blind.
Mm-hmm.
The second reason is that I can see what Uruk has on his capital, and I know that he's running an imprisoned god because of his scales. So I can lock down his capital with this army, while also figuring out what Uruk is going to have to defend it with. So you can see that I'm moving both some dryads and siege chaff to 10 this turn. Like if you look at 10 and hit Y, you can see it's that one. So I'm moving enough siege chaff in order to keep the fort cracked, and I have those crossbows forward deployed so that when he moves out with mages, they're potentially going to cause some attrition against them, right? So like generally you have the mages, in the middle to do point buffing for Uruk. So by having your crossbows forward deployed, you can cause basically some free mage kills with this. This isn't expected to win a battle, it's expected to see what he has that he's willing to send out against 100 white centaurs.
Right.
And then if he doesn't send anything out, like if he did move his army out and I just didn't catch it, right, because I don't know where it is right now, I can see this turn that he has something on 57. So that's where his actual army is. It's on Chibalba.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is I wouldn't be surprised if it's here. Now, of course, in the Omni version of this, we would have known, but I can't see it here.
Yeah, so that's sort of why I think it's worth talking about. Like, from my perspective, I don't know that yet, but I'm getting that idea now, right? So I'm going to basically I'm playing it safe in terms of taking that fight because I'm pretty confident that my magic versus his magic I'm going to win. Because if you look at my research, I am almost at enchantment 5, which means that I can do a surprise foul vapors drop in just 2 turns.
Right.
So I can wait for that and then use that to wipe his army.
Okay.
And then in the meantime, if he doesn't successfully break out of that fort, I get to storm his capital for free. So
Right.
it's like win-win. Like I get to do like a trap to beat his army instead of needing to do army versus army, which will cause sacred losses. And I get to take his capital. So it's like the fastest, safest way to win this war.
All right.
And then along those lines, I'm doing as much bulk raiding as possible in order to cover basically just as much real estate to keep Uruk penned in. So that's both going to limit his ability to consolidate his forces, because you can see he does have like 40 Iron Warriors on 41. But if I have his capital sieged, even if he does have an army in 10 and he does break it out this turn, he still can't consolidate his army reliably, and I'll still be able to pick a fight against half of it.
Okay. Super.
Yeah,
Bit of a classic Napoleon move, you know, defeat in detail.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So, and then you can also see that I have a group of Centaur warriors coming to 22. So you had mentioned, and I also have a group of cataphracts in 3 that are going onto the capital to join my main force.
Right.
So the reason that I'm bringing this up is that you'd mentioned like non-sacred things. So you can also just I guess kind of talk about it. These guys, the Centaur warriors, because they're berserkers, they take buffs extremely well once you have like protection buffs to put on them.
Right.
But you don't want to send them into army versus army fights, especially stuff like slugfests against Enkidu Iron Warriors, whereas cataphracts are actually very good for that role. So cataphracts take buffs even better because of their high armor protection.
Right.
So their base protection going up is going to push them over the edge. And then, of course, you have Legion of Steel to make that already decent armor even better.
Yes.
And then because they're not penalized by the square penalty of the larger bless, they also are very easy to keep information in order to receive those AoE 25 buffs in groups of 50. So like,
Right.
I think I used 40 just in order to like kind of be safe, and because anything past that point is a little excessive anyways. So like my mid-game armies when I'm fighting Ind are these like blocks of 40 of these cataphracts with a pan in the middle and then an N3 pan doing battlefield spells. And then each of those things is like a thug-proof, like it's an army that you basically need to spend more than it costs to beat it.
Right. Okay.
It's not a death stack by any means, but it's good enough that it's very expensive to fight.
So here's our magic hour. So
yeah,
how would you like to summarize what we've covered?
I'm playing a very normal pan game with just really solid fundamentals.
Okay.
In the early game, there's nothing special going on. There's going to be some tricks that come out later, but everything that I'm leveraging is basically just taking advantage of Pan's natural strengths. And the only very important part that I guess I would want to emphasize is that while all of this is going on, I'm researching a lot in Magic 3. So I'm hitting these, like, Pangaea's research is not the best. And you can't make boosters natively either.
Right.
So in order for me to keep even or ahead, you need to leave a decent number of mages behind just reading books.
Yes.
And you absolutely always need those Magic 3 scales. So right now I have both, so I'm in a really good position. And that's based on just like, picking good wars while not actually slowing down my continuous expansion. So I basically wheeled from one war to a little bit of cleanup in order to secure those thrones that I needed in order to get the borders that I wanted, into immediately going to the next war, into the next war. And throughout all of this, I'm still researching.
Yeah, so 9 research for 220 gold.
Is awful.
Yes.
Well, it's 12 in.
Yeah, with your Magic 3, that's the base, but just commenting that, yeah, obviously, but as you've discussed, as wonderful as Centaurides and Centaurs are, the Dryads are so damn much better. You kind of, you want Dryads.
Yeah, I'm actually using both. Like you can see, I actually have a bunch of Centaurs from my forests.
Well, and you've already started a little bit of light thugging.
Yeah. Those are some of that's from I think event gear actually.
Okay.
Like I think I got the gold shield from an event, and therefore I'm like, oh, it's time to make a thug. So I did.
Oh yeah. You have no way to make that guy. But, you know, lion pelts are so cost efficient.
Yes. So I spent 10 gems on it, and then I got a 10 gem item. So with that, you have a really solid thug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just good boy.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah, like I mentioned, nothing special, but really solid, just like fundamental Pangaea play. Like this is sort of just the template for how you should play MA Pan.
Yeah, this would be a really good guide. Would be a basic, totally functional Pangaea build for anybody. I've played Pangaea a bit lately in blitzes, but when I do that in blitz, I have a tendency to do stupid, silly shit because it's blitz.
You always want to do dumb stuff in blitzes.
Yeah, I do. I pretty much always try to do something meme-ish or something kind of outrageous. You know, like maybe quickness, white centers with quickness, which is overkill.
Fire shield.
Or body ethereal or something goofy.
Fire shield's actually really fun.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. That'd be very fun.
Yeah. It's awful blessed, but it's really fun.
Yeah.
Small game.
Well, thank you, Sai. And we will be back. Probably in a couple weeks. What I'm trying to do is sort of get as many of the people up in 1 week before I go back to them.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Message me when you're ready to record.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. See you next time.
Bye, guys.